So we have a new interview with Yoshinori Kitase and Naoki Hamaguchi, and in it they talk about making Rebirth for the PlayStation 5. There's some talk about Sephiroth and also updating some of the story elements for the modern ages. If any of that sounds cool to you, feel free to click the like button and subscribe if you're new here and you'd like to stick around. It's always appreciated. And just a quick note, excuse my voice, I'm a bit sick at the moment, so my voice is not working like it usually does, so it might be a little bit difficult to speak in this video, but I'm doing the best I can. The interview comes to us from Hobby Consolas, and again they got to sit down with Naoki Hamaguchi and Yoshinori Kitase. So that first question talks about making Rebirth directly from the ground up for the PS5. Hamaguchi responds by saying the fact that it is exclusive to PS5 was decided at a very early stage of development, and that allowed us to focus on customizing and optimizing the graphics to make it the best possible, because we were able to focus on the power of the PS5 hardware. I think one of the best things about PS5 is its very fast SSD. It was a big help in making the graphics even better than the previous game. We are using Unreal Engine 4 as a base, but we have completely customized it to optimize as much as possible for PS5. This has allowed us to achieve high quality graphics. The density of the presentation is enormous. We made some improvements in Intergrade, but this is next level, so all of this has served to make the graphics much better. As for the different graphics modes, we have a performance mode that works at 60 frames per second or more, and the quality mode with 4K resolution. Players can customize the graphics with these options. So that confirms that the game is running on Unreal Engine 4, although it is a customized version of it, and graphically, the game does look incredible. Intergrade was already a great looking game, but looking at recent screenshots that have come out for Rebirth, the graphical detail is an enormous step up from Intergrade itself. You know, looking at characters like Barret and Cloud, seeing all the detail on their clothing and armor, it looks insane. The lighting looks great, the enemies look great, and it's a very powerful system. And when you're developing for one console, it does suck that other people won't get to play it, but you do have the benefit of just focusing on that one piece of hardware, streamlining everything, and making sure you can make it the best possible game possible. You're really trying to squeeze that PlayStation 5 for all it's worth, and you don't have to worry about an Xbox or a PC build yet, or a Switch or anything like that, or even being held back by a PlayStation 4. And it's a very similar situation for Final Fantasy 16 was PS5 exclusive, although in that regard, Square Enix, Yoshi P, they did have help from Sony. They had some engineers from Sony come in and help them optimize the game, but based on this, it sounds like this is all Square Enix on this game. Up next, they talk about some fans not being happy that you can't transfer your save data from Remake to Rebirth, as well as your weapons, materia, and stats and all that. Hamaguchi responds by saying it was a difficult decision, but in the end, we felt it was very important that each episode of the trilogy function as a standalone game and also be a great experience. So to make the balance and structure of the game work as well as possible in the second part, it is much easier to start from scratch than to carry over something from the previous game and balance the new one with that in mind. So it was a difficult decision, but in the end, we thought we could get a better experience this way, instead of transferring data. That said, we thought it would be disingenuous to the players who played the remake, and we wanted to do something about it. Therefore, we have added a bonus for players who have saved data from the first game. They will obtain a summon materia that they can use from the beginning, a small gift. And that all makes sense. As nice as it would be to transfer our save data from Remake to Rebirth, it wouldn't really make sense in terms of balancing out the game, because now you might have some players that have a super powered up high level party that's at level 50 with maxed out materia and abilities, and that wouldn't really work with the game balance because you're just going to mow through everything on your first playthrough from the very beginning. So it makes sense to start at zero. Let our players build the characters up on this new journey, and I'm pretty sure there'll be story implications for why we start off a little bit weaker, and I'm very interested to see how they handle that. But it is nice that they're going to give us a summon bonus as long as we still have that old save data from Remake on our hard drives. That I'm looking forward to. Up next, they talk about changing the direction for certain things that were in the original game that may not have worked in the newer versions of the games. Kitase says, "There are not too many things. We have tried to adapt even the minor characters or episodes of the story in a way that is more appropriate to the game format. But of course, we have made changes. More than 20 years have passed since the original game, and the world has changed. Many things have changed. How things are displayed, people's tastes, their inclinations. And obviously we have tried to reflect that. There are some things from the original game that might not work as well or hold up as well today. In Remake, there are also similar things, such as the honeybee or the suburbs. We have to give another approach to all those things related to the world of Night, obviously. But overall, I think it was a good approach, because it allowed us to reimagine and represent some of those elements instead of removing them completely. And that links to the fact that we have hardly cut anything. Practically all of the elements of the original FF7 are still present in one form or another in the Remake trilogy, which obviously makes sense. If you look at the old school FF7, some of the stuff in there just has not aged well. And I know there's going to be people that complain that it's woke or PC or whatnot, and it doesn't really have anything to do with that. It's just updating your story and scenarios to fit modern times. You know, back in the Honeybee Inn section of the original FF7, a lot of that stuff was used kind of as a joking manner, and it was super over the top and cartoony, but looking at how they did it in 7 Remake, there's so much more heart to the section of the Honeybee Inn, with meeting Andrea and all of the dancers and everyone involved, and the message of the Honeybee Inn in Final Fantasy VII Remake is actually really beautiful. It's something along the lines of, you know, don't be afraid to be yourself, be who you are and live that. And I think that's a really beautiful message. But also, the localization team has done a fantastic job with writing the characters and updating their dialogue and modernizing not just certain sections of the game, but the characters has seemingly done wonders for what we're seeing so far in Remake and Rebirth. Up next, they talk about what we can expect to see from the Gold Saucer. Hamaguchi goes on to say, the Gold Saucer is a key point of the game. We put a lot of effort and resources behind many parts, but Gold Saucer has been especially cared for to make it the best it can be. A lot of people are waiting for things like the mini-games. Don't worry, they're all there. They're all great and very fun, but I think even above that, what people are most looking forward to seeing from Gold Saucer are Cloud's dates on the gondola. And don't worry, that scene was done very well. Not just the quote itself, but also the scenes that lead up to it. It's presented as a big splashy show, and it works really well, so you can expect big things from Gold Saucer. Don't worry. I'm looking forward to seeing fans' reactions to the quote, because we've included more options than were in the original game. There are more variations and different things that weren't there before. Obviously, it depends on who your date is, but you're going to see some really cool things. And I'm really excited to see the Gold Saucer section of the game. I full on expect it to be like a bigger budget, fancier, more grand version of what we saw at the Honeybee Inn in 7 Remake. And obviously, Andrea is now there. He's moved on up. He's got a better job. He's probably making way more money and can put on these really big, flashy, expensive shows. So I'm really excited to see the entrance of the Gold Saucer in the show that Andrea is going to be in. And I think they're going to make it feel much more like a bigger, not just like a carnival, but more of a casino type atmosphere. Lots of flashing lights, gold everywhere, people dressed to the nines. I can't wait to see it. It's going to be super fun. And we're all probably going to spend a lot of time in the Gold Saucer just playing those mini games. I'm very excited to see how our date is going to be chosen, because they put so much emphasis on character bonds and, you know, these skill trees and learning the team up attacks, and how those bonds aren't just in the story, but they're going to be in the gameplay. So I'm very curious to see what affects those bond levels to the point where our date gets chosen for that gondola ride. And speaking of the quote, I'm very curious to see what the quote is. I haven't played OG FF7 in a very long time, so I don't quite remember all of the dialogue in that section, but I do know that you can get Barrett as your date. So I'm curious to see what I need to do to get Barrett on that gondola ride in Rebirth. Up next, they talk about what we can expect to see from Sephiroth in Rebirth. Hamaguchi says, the first time we see Sephiroth in FF7 Rebirth is in the Nibelheim flashback, 7 years before the events of the game, when he was still a normal soldier operative. There he still retained a lot of his humanity. You discover a lot of things about the character, his original personality, and who he used to be. We delve into Sephiroth at length in that section, before moving back to the story taking place in the present. The character's motivation is to follow Sephiroth around the world, pursue that mirage, that image of Sephiroth. He appears several times throughout the journey, I think even more times than in the original. You come to feel like you've had a brush with Sephiroth, and you understand better who he is. You delve deeper into the character, you learn more about him, so he has a very prominent role as you meet him along the way, which I very much like. I know in the original, Sephiroth did show up from time to time, which kept him pretty mysterious. He wasn't there from the get-go, and there are some people that are a bit apprehensive because now, in the Remake trilogy, Sephiroth is showing up when he normally doesn't. We're seeing him a lot more often. And I personally really like that. I like when our villain has a presence from beginning, middle, and end. You know, in some Final Fantasies, I know Final Fantasy 9 did this, as well as 16, your big bad doesn't show up until like halfway through the game, or in some cases, in like Final Fantasy 9 situation, at the very end, after you've beaten Kuja, you know, you have Necron show up and you're like, who's this guy? So it can make bonding with that villain or feeling any type of emotions for them a bit difficult when they just kind of pop up. And that was an issue I had with Final Fantasy 16. You know, Ultima, he shows up about halfway through the story, I think, and I never really clicked with him. I never felt any type of emotion towards him. I just felt him to be kind of boring and very one note. And I felt like going away from the dominance and this more grounded reality to this super powerful being in Ultima kind of took me out of the story a bit. Up next, they talk about not only the iconography of Sephiroth, but what makes him so special and powerful. Kitase says, "This goes back to conversations I had with Tetsuya Nomura, who did the character design and was also involved in the script for the original game. We designed Sephiroth and created Sephiroth. Essentially, we had a conversation and decided something very early in development that has held true ever since. All these years, within the Final Fantasy VII universe, there is no one better than Sephiroth. He will always be the strongest, the most powerful, and the most evil there is. In many RPGs, there is what we call boss inflation. You meet a very powerful boss who is the ultimate warrior, but oh boy, behind that character is another who turns out to be even more powerful. You defeat him, and surprise, there was another even more powerful one behind him, and that leaves those who arrived first in a bad place. We decided we weren't going to do that in FF7, that there was going to be no one above Sephiroth. He's always going to be the big bad and the most powerful villain. I think that may have something to do with it remaining so memorable, because within Final Fantasy VII, no one is better than Sephiroth. Which goes back to what I was saying before, when you have these villains that show up, you beat them, and then suddenly, boom, there's someone else like Ultima or Necron. It does make the initial villain look bad, because it's like, oh, this isn't the all-powerful being, the evil entity that I'm supposed to beat down and then win the game. So having Sephiroth be that end-all, be-all type of villain is really cool. That's what keeps him so menacing and so special, because there's really no one that can beat him other than Cloud. Hamaguchi follows up by saying Sephiroth is already a very popular and beloved character, but let me tell you, I think people are going to love him and have an even stronger connection with him after playing Rebirth. We had a lot of reactions from the press after playing the flashback with Sephiroth and Cloud as young people. He is slightly different from the Cloud that most people know. He is rougher, more newbie, he is a well less versed character, and it's very interesting to see that. But we also see Sephiroth from a different angle, when he wasn't the villain that he would later become. The demo ends at a certain point, and after that comes something that hasn't been seen yet, although it's something that was in the original, so people already know. We see what made Sephiroth stop to be that heroic, more human character and become the villain who disappears into the flames, becoming the true Sephiroth. Even knowing what happens when I was working on that part, it really impacted me. I wouldn't go as far as to say that I sided with Sephiroth, but I empathized with him. You understand much better why he made that decision, and I think that when people see it, they will love Sephiroth even more. And that's a quote that I really love. I don't necessarily want to side with Sephiroth, but I do want to understand him a little more in why he's doing what he's doing, especially in Rebirth. We don't know in the remake trilogy what Sephiroth's overall plan is going to be, but some of the best villains are the people that think that what they're doing is the right thing. That's what makes them so threatening and scary at times. So to learn more about Sephiroth, again, it's a fine line you gotta straddle between giving information to the player so we can empathize more with them, but also not revealing too much, and then you take away everything that's mysterious about that character. And you gotta put yourself in his shoes. You know, if you found out one day that your parents weren't your parents and you were created in a lab from this crazy space alien that crash landed on the planet, you'd probably freak out a little bit too. Now up next, they address the elephant in the room by saying that, you know, in the original game, there's obviously the death of a very important character. We all know that it happens. It's one of the most best known parts in video games ever, so obviously they gotta do something different, right? Yoshinori Kitase and Naoki Hamaguchi both stay silent at this point in time, which actually cracked me up quite a bit, because that's a massive spoiler for Rebirth. We don't know what the heck's gonna happen this go around, but the fact that they didn't even respond, something about that is really hilarious. And last but not least, they bring up the idea again of DLC and if there are any things planned. Hamaguchi responds, "We currently don't have any DLC planned, but we'll watch the reaction reactions after the game goes on sale and might think about doing something, but right now there are no plans. Which was a similar response that Yoshi P and CBU3 gave for Final Fantasy 16. We don't have anything planned, but if it comes out and people respond well to it, then maybe we'll throw something together. In the case of Rebirth, I don't know if I want DLC because I really want them to get started on Remake Part 3 and put all of their money and focus and attention into that game and make it the best that it can possibly be. But if they were to do DLC, I guess you could do something that either fleshes out Vincent a little more or allows us to play as Sid, and we can learn more about Sid and his backstory and how he ends up in Rocket Town and feuding with Shinra and the space program and all of that cool stuff. But with that being said, that's the video. My voice is gone. I'm Curious Corduroy. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think about this interview. I'll leave a link in the description because I didn't go over every single question because it's a bit redundant and it's already talking about stuff we covered in previous videos, so I don't really want to repeat myself too much, but those links will be in the description below. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.